in order for me to live well, I need to have contact with nature, with trees, with the outdoors. Today, I took a walk, and just it's coming into winter here in the Northwest, and just that brisk air. So I think there's that that's important, and I also think that it's important to have a relationship with something that's greater than ourselves.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick Rodell. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, our guest is Char Sundust. Char is a mystic, a poet, and spiritual director. She is the founder of Sundust Oracle Institute and provides trainings for visionary leaders, healers, warriors, and teachers. Hi, Char. How are you doing?
Hi, Broderick. I'm doing really well. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for asking. And it's always a blessing to work with you and be with you.
Well, I am excited to have this conversation. I feel the same way about you. We always have lively conversations, and I think that my audience would benefit tremendously from hearing your take on what it means to live well and a good life. Before we jump into that, can you tell us a little bit more about you, who you are, and in any way you feel like doing so?
It's a very sweet way to ask that. It's a big question. Who am I? No. Who are we? What are we doing here?
Right.
Yeah, it is. I think that I discover more about who I am every day, Broderick. I think that it's constantly unfolding, and my identity is constantly unfolding. Who I was yesterday is so different today, and who I'm going to be tomorrow hopefully will be different, and maybe maintain some of the things that I have held closest and most meaningful. But my work has really been around teaching spirituality and teaching leadership, spiritual leadership, and training visionaries. We have so many skilled, incredibly gifted visionaries, people who can vision, people who receive knowledge from the world, and there aren't really places for people to explore what that really means. And if they take that to, many professionals, it would be considered something that is not a gift and a blessing. And it's only a blessing. It's only a gift. And sometimes, just like every other role in our world and as spiritual leaders, it's really to be able to hear those things, see them, and translate them in such a way that it makes life better for others, and makes more connection and wisdom and guidance for ourselves. And so I'm hoping we can get some more good, gifted, spiritual, well, any kind of gifted leaders. We really
exactly.
need some.
We definitely do.
Yeah, that says a little bit about my work and about kind of how I view things.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's you're the perfect person to have this conversation with, because I'm interested in that. Like, how do we make the world better? How do we make the lives of ourselves and others better? And speaking of that, so what does it mean to live well to you? What does that look like?
Well, I think the first thing is that may there be trees in my world. I think that that's one of the most important things to me. And I come from a really rich spiritual and cultural heritage, and ethnicity, a group of like a little collective of ethnicities within my being. And in all of them, nature is very important. And I think that one of the things that we really need is to be in contact. In order for me to live well, I need to have contact with nature, with trees, with the outdoors. Today, I took a walk, and just it's coming into winter here in the Northwest, and just that brisk air. So I think there's that that's important, and I also think that it's important to have a relationship with something that's greater than ourselves. Um, I think that humanity has kind of gotten things a little reversed. We've put instead of putting the divine first, or the earth first, or all of these beautiful creatures that surround us first, or we haven't really put anything before us or ahead of us. And all of these beings, all of these creatures, these all of these things are really greater than we are, and have been here longer, and actually live. Many of them live like trees, live much, much longer than human beings,
Absolutely.
and so do stones, and so do there's many creatures who live longer, and beings who live on this planet. So I think living well is really the ability to be in service to these other beings, um, and to be able to have a relationship, some form of, I call it like earth intimacy. It's, there's this intimacy that we can have with the world that surrounds us that will support our very brief lives in a way that feels eternal, in a way that feels like a richness beyond what the physical can give us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So living well to you is a really important part of this, is being in touch with nature, being
Mm-hmm.
in relationship with our natural selves and the natural world around us, and taking into consideration the impact of our actions on this environment around us, and also just our well-being, like you said, going for a walk out in nature and being
Mm-hmm.
with the trees. And I feel you on that. I love trees. and
Ah, they're
and
so
just
great. Yeah.
really great when you're in the forest and just looking up,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the northwest with the very large trees there, and just being up in there and enjoying that beauty. Let's unpack this a little bit. You mentioned something about your ancestry. I'm curious about, where did this come from? This idea of being in touch with nature, being in resonant with nature. I know it's kind of a weird thing to say because we are part of nature, we are an expression of it, but
Yes.
we have to word it that way because sometimes our
Yes.
attitude towards nature is to dominate it, and it's like, well,
Right.
hold on for a minute, aren't we a part of it? So I'm curious to know,
Mhm.
where does this come from? What are your influences?
Hmm. Well, I have two mothers, so I have the great blessing of having had two mothers, an adoptive mother and a birth mother. And so a lot of it really comes from them. And my adoptive mother is Oglala Lakota Sioux from the Makaha band, and then my mother is mixed race of Mayan and Mexican, English and Iranian, and uh, and there's some others there. I have like 15 different ethnicities in me from both sides. So,
Oh, wow.
but my mother's really influenced me, and that's probably the culture that has influenced me most is both of my mothers, the indigenous heritage. And then, of course, I did a DNA test, and all kinds of other amazing, interesting things showed up, including my birth father. So, which is another conversation. So
Oh,
there's
that's awesome.
Turkish, and yeah. So there's some of these are new to me. So I haven't. I'm just newly exploring the Iranian. I didn't know about that. I didn't, you know. So it's really interesting. Like I was saying earlier about that intersection of our identity, you know, and when we look into each chromosome, like what we discover. And so there's many different ethnicities within me, but the ones that have most influenced me are the Mexican, the Mayan, and some English, some of the ancient Druidic. My mother also studied some of the ancient Druid ways of being, and then the ways that we're connected to the earth in that way, and then uh, the Lakota traditions. That's my true culture, and my mothers and my brothers have really made sure that that they pass that down to me in a way that that is really something that I can give, that is that really informs, like, this is something that informs everything that I do. So they've given it to me in a way that it informs everything that I do, and my connection to nature and to animals. And there's a Lakota word, chekpa, which means your animal twin. And so we all have our animal twins. In Mexican or in Spanish, it would be called your nagual. And in many tribes in Africa, it would be called your bush soul. And or in clans, for clans, it would be called your in European traditions, it would be called your clan. And so, but all people feel this connection to this other being or have a love. It's very rare to meet a person who doesn't like animals or doesn't have a favorite animal. You know, everybody kind of has that, and so there are these ways that that we can connect with something that enriches us, gives our lives more meaning, and assists us in delivering, our purpose, our destiny, our view, our perspective in different ways. So yeah, that's really what's most informed is my incredible mothers. Both of them are
Mm.
amazing. Yeah. And Barbara was
Mm.
also French, so she's French and Lakota. Yeah.
Mm.
So, and then my Matilda mom is, yeah, the blend of all kinds of other wonderful things. It's a really interesting intersection.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very interesting. Yeah, I think for the audience who may not know, can you unpack some of those ideas, philosophies from the? I know there's various uh, what we typically call Native American traditions, but can you
Mm,
elaborate a little bit more and share with the audience what is that worldview? What is this? These soul or spirit connections that you're speaking of. Um, can you say a
mm,
little bit more about the worldview of
yeah.
this perspective?
Yeah. Well, I think that I know I can only speak from what I learned from the time that I was very young, but the worldview is really we take care of the world, and uh, I was taught that we can hear the world and we can hear the world anywhere we go if we'll just listen. And I think that one of the things that we've stopped doing, and I think this is true for all cultures, is that many of us are not listening anymore to the stones, to the trees, to the birds. And you know, I mean, one of my brothers is, I mean, he does transmissions, he's a Lakota guy, and he does transmissions, and that worldview is still the same. In all of our conversations through time, it's always been the same. And then, I have other adoptive brothers. I also have brothers from, I've discovered a new brother who's older than me. You know how that goes.
Oh yeah, I know.
Because of DNA testing, which is so great. I'm so grateful for DNA testing right now. But also, just seeing that, looking at the Iranian culture or the Turkish culture, you're also seeing this. No matter where you go in the world, when you're looking at um, before technology, modern technology, you're looking at ancient technologies. And so when we're looking at ancient technologies, you see this is something really interesting, Broderick. I've had the holy privilege of traveling and going to different places in the world, and I have a thing for cave art. Like, it's kind of serious. And I'm just like, just take me to the cave art and I will be happy. And I've seen cave art at the base of the Pyrenees Mountains. I've seen it here in Washington State. I've seen it in Africa. I've seen it just globally. I've had this holy privilege of seeing, and it's so interesting to me that it is that worldview. If you go under the crust of the earth, if you go into a cave, that is, this ancient technology of record keeping, right? And of these incredible etches into the stone. you see, I saw the same thing in Africa as I did in Europe, right? I saw the same thing. So these drawings of the deer or of the and in here in the States, and there's this repetition of these symbols and these images. And what I find is, I find that, when we're talking about the worldview, it's like there's images of the deer, there's images of spirals, there's images of people going into different ways of being or different states of being. Um, there's all of these symbols that we can follow that are speaking to us, that are teaching us and telling us and passing down how we need to live. So I think that caring for the earth, caring for each other. Um, my mother's also part Basque, and so and that's also an indigenous worldview. Um, that is really based on, at the core of every community, at the core of every village, every tribe, we really want to care for one another. We really want to take care of one another. We want to look out for one another. And, the real work is finding ways to do that, to care for each other, and to care for this precious earth for the ones who are coming, those yet unborn in some cultures. For one of my moms, it would be, well, for both of my moms, it would be for the next 7 generations, what can we do to preserve what is good, true, and lasting, for those yet unborn, for the babies, for the children who aren't born yet. So it's good work. And now we just have so much to repair, I think,
Yeah.
in order for
Yeah.
that to happen.
Yeah. I think these are very, very, very interesting, profound ideas. I think that, you know, what I'm gleaning from what you're saying is that uh, there are traditions who view the world as animated, the world is alive. And there's this sense of connection with all of the animals. We tend to exclude ourselves from being an animal, but we actually
Right?
are animals.
Interesting, right?
uh, so
Mm-hmm.
we there's a time that we in our history, and there are peoples on the planet today that still see this, that the world is alive, the world is animated, we are
Mm.
part of it, we are in connection with it, not necessarily here to dominate it. We're playing a role within this. What's the word I'm looking for? We're playing a role in this mixture of different expressions of life, and how do we take responsibility for that? Now, I'm not saying that these folks think the way that we think about things, but I think that there's something to glean and something to learn from that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
in the scientific revolution, that which has had its benefits. I don't want to take back. I don't. You can't take it back anyway. You can't take
Oh,
back
yeah.
evolution, but you don't. This idea of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There's something to seeing the world as animated, as alive. There's something to seeing your uh, interconnectedness with other animals, with other beings. It's something to seeing a rock as a being. Do I need to anthropomorphize and say that, yeah, a rock is a being just like me? No, no, no one is saying that. It's just saying that it is a being of some sort, not necessarily the same as how we describe biological life. And I think
Right.
that gets conflated, and people use that as it's a straw man argument that, oh, that's just weird. How can you say a rock is alive? Well, rock, you're not saying live the way we categorize biological life. It's a
Yeah.
different way of looking at that and talking about it. And I think that there's something to glean from that, and just hearing what you're saying and how you keep coming back to nature. We are a
Mm.
part of this. We are connected to this. We need to keep our remind ourselves of that bond, that connection that we have with nature, and
The
and
agreement.
you're
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and you're implying that that is an important part of what it means to live well, to live
Yeah.
good in the society. Is that a somewhat of a summary of what you're saying?
I'm just so impressed, Broderick. I'm It's like you're such an like you're just listening at such a deep level. It's so beautiful to be heard that way. Yeah. So
Oh,
yeah,
well, thank you.
that's that is what I'm saying. And yeah, and I think being connected with that dream of the earth, we're a part of the earth's dreaming, and the earth is dreaming right now, and we're a part of that dream. And but how can we begin to use this new technology, the power of this new technology and this ancient technology to create something better, right? I think that's really what we're being called to do, is to blend these things in a way that really serves the well-being of all creatures. And yeah, it's interesting to think about. I have a twin. My twin, he's adopted me. I don't know how long ago, but very, very, very long time ago. And he's like, "I love you so much. You must be my twin." And I was like, "Wow, that's very generous. Thank you." And I do feel like we really do mirror each other pretty well. But I had him come to the class. He's a storyteller. He's a Tsimshian storyteller from the Raven Clan. And he came to my class. He comes every year during the winter, usually to do storytelling for my spiritual identity class. And he came last week. And he was talking, he always tells a story that's related to the material. And this time it was the numinous.
Mm.
And he was so funny. He's like, "So Char just sends me this word, numinous." It says, let's do numinous. Let's talk about numinous. And of course it's related to other symbols and other things, but just that, which really means connection to the divine, connection to the sacred, connection to, and he told a lovely story, but something that he, said for, as a Tsimshian person, is that the Tsimshian nation, they don't talk to the rocks. They wouldn't do that, you know.
Mm.
But they talk to, the ravens, and they talk to all of these other creatures, and the Lord of Heaven, which is called, it's called the Lord of Heaven. And so there's all of these other things that they interact with in ways. That's what he was saying to my students. Like, we interact with all these other things, but not necessarily with the rocks. So I just thought that was interesting. Whereas for me, one of the very first things that I did was I would sit and listen to the rocks for hours. Right? For me, they hold so much wisdom. Like, oh, here, I'll show you. Um, just here's a little bag with a little stone in. And this is a stone that I work with a lot. This is,
Mm.
an insight, and it has a name, and it works with me each day. And but I think that Michael Yellowbird, who people can look up online, he's done some really great research on the impact of the brain on doing these interacting with nature in these different ways, and what he calls meditation on an item or on an object. So whether that is a stone, or whether that is a tree, or whether that is a thought or word, it's one of the ways that we can return home. So maybe for me it's a stone, maybe for someone else it's a tree, or in Raven
Mm-hmm.
Speaker's story it was the hole in the sky.
Mm.
um, that they had to get up to, right? So it's interesting to think about, even though there's ways that all tribes are very different and have way different ways of doing and thinking about things, and different worldviews, and different cosmologies. There's also just so much common ground that we all share, no matter where we're from. And I think that that's a part of what the numinous, or the spirit, is asking us to do. The spirit is saying, we are connected. We are, we're all related, as my moms tell me. Everything is, we're all
Mm-hmm.
related. I'm kind of an example of that with all these ethnicities. I'm kind of like, wow, we all are related.
Right?
Like,
For
wow,
sure.
how'd that happen?
Right. Exactly.
Like, gee, what happened to make that happen? That's interesting. So just like
Yeah.
from different poles, right? From South America
Mm-hmm.
to, Central
Mm-hmm.
America to,
Mm-hmm.
Canada and Europe and Middle East.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, how did that happen? You know? So
Yeah. Yeah. I
we
love that
know.
common, yeah, that common theme again comes back to we are, excuse me, we are it. We are a part of it.
Yeah.
We are an expression of it. Build relationship with it. Um,
Mhm.
Humble ourselves and try to connect with it in some capacity. I think for me, that's what these traditions, that's how I'm interpreting it, of course, what these
Mhm.
traditions do. I recall this experience when I used to live there in Seattle. And I was talking with this guy who's really into, they call it tracking. And he was studying with someone, I think they were Lakota. He was really into tracking. And he was like, go out in the woods and find a sit spot. That was a part of the training. So
Mm.
you go and just sit in the woods and just sit still. I don't remember the exact time, but I would do it for like 20 minutes or so. But he said, sit still, don't move, and watch how nature comes to life. It's such a profound impact on me, especially you know how it is up there in the Northwest. It's so
Oh.
beautiful, so lush. And so just sit in the forest and just sit still and sit quiet and
Mm.
let nature reveal itself. Excuse me. And because one of the things that he said, he's like, we go out there and we make up so much noise and just
Mhm.
not paying attention, but to like sit and be with it. It was life transforming. I got in the
Yeah.
habit of doing it regularly, and especially up there. I think
It's
that's
so
one of the most
powerful.
perfect places to do it. Yeah, and to just be there in the midst of that lush green. And he said, "Now watch how the birds think, and everything comes to life when you sit
Mm.
still and be quiet, and start to really connect with that." And one may call it communicating, but just sitting still and listening
Mhm.
and being present, not making so much disturbance, and see what happens. And he was right. It's hard to put into words what that experience is. But all I can say is it was life transforming for me. I grew up in a rural country environment in South Carolina, and I love the country.
Mm.
Anyway, but I never did that. I had never
Nice.
just sat there quiet and still and let it reveal itself to me. And it was just powerful. And I think these traditions, first of all, I didn't have all these distracting technologies that we had, that we
Yeah,
have.
that's true.
And then just sitting there, they created stories and narratives to try to speak to their experience and
Mhm.
encouraging the tribe, the community to be like, there's
Yeah.
something here. Here's a narrative and a story that encourages a way of living, that it
Yeah.
can enhance this experience when you're still and connected with the natural environment around you. So I hear you.
Mm.
I don't do that any as often as I used to, and
Yeah.
I should be doing it more. I should, but it would behoove
Well,
me
we don't want to
for
shit
my
on
mental
ourselves.
health to do
I
it.
know. No, but well, I think I also think that we need to encourage one another.
Hmm.
Um, we need to encourage one another to have a spiritual life, to have to attend to what we feel is sacred, and we need people to encourage us in real time, like what we're doing.
Hmm.
And to have a conversation. So I really respect what you're doing because it's a form of encouragement. You know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I think we all need help. We need help from each other to encourage each other mm, to do better, to live
Yeah.
a good life, to live well. What does that mean? There's so many different angles, perspectives that you can take. And how do I glean from you in this conversation?
Mhm.
Um, what can I do to, what can I take from this conversation to help me do a better job, for lack of a word, better word, better. How
I
do
like that better word better.
right?
We can use
I
butter
know,
or
yeah, right. I know. Somebody's like, well, better. You're trying to improve yourself. Whatever. You get the idea. I'm not. I don't get caught up into using all these the perfect
yeah.
word, but because language just merely points to what you're trying to describe. But I think that when we are in conversation, it helps us guide us in some capacity. It opens our minds to potential another way of being, and we get to play with that and
Mhm.
take that out into how we show up in the world. So I'm grateful for being reminded of the importance of, like, oh yeah, be in nature, See the world
Yeah.
as animated. See what
Mm.
happens when you think and see the world that way. I think there's something to it. There's something that
Mhm.
it's hard to put a finger to. You got to go out and run the experiment. That's that scientific mindset, right? Go run the experiment. Go sit out in nature. Go be out there and
Yeah,
see what happens.
I love that. Yes. I mean, you're also a scientist, which is something I appreciate a lot.
Yeah, no. Sometimes, in I've said quite a few times here in previous podcasts about our over materialization of things, overly
Yeah.
material. We look at the world as simply material. And yet I'm here talking about being in connection with the material world. But it's looking at the world in a way, looking at the earth, and you've hinted at this, I think.
Mhm.
You've not just used the word earth, and you're thinking about molecules and atoms and quarks and all of that stuff.
Mhm.
You're saying earth, and you're also using the word sacred and
Yeah.
divine. That's very interesting. And
Mhm.
I think that that's not just simply reducing it to physical earth. Yet at the same time, we're saying connect with this physical earth, but with an attitude of seeing it as divine. And
Yeah.
can you say a little bit more about what you mean by sacred or divine?
Yeah. That's a great thing. I wanted to speak a little bit to there's a um, in Mexico, there's many tribes that are that do a lot of weaving. For instance, my scarf that I'm wearing actually
Hmm.
is Mayan, is
Awesome.
a Mayan weaving, and it's made from a plant fiber. And like in the Huichol tradition, there is a special loom, and you lean your loom against the tree, and then you're weaving. And when you're weaving, you're thinking with a good heart. There's actually a book by the name
Hmm.
of Thinking with a Good Heart, and
Awesome.
about this process. And it really is. It's the loom is connected to the creator, and so you've leaned your loom against the tree, and the loom is connected with the creator, and then the weaving is medicine. The
Hmm.
weaving itself that's coming through is medicine, and it has healing power because it's come from the great mystery. And then something that I've learned, and it's so interesting because I've seen this with some of the Turkish, with the ancient Turkish, with the Tengriism. I've seen this with the Basque. I've seen it with my mixed indigenous heritage, and in that, you see this way that we're supposed to bring something to the earth. We're supposed, like, we are gifts, like we're like, you know I don't know, birthday, we're like a birthday present for the earth. Our birthday is the earth's birthday, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm. Yeah.
like when we're born, we're like born with a gift, and like then the purpose of our life is kind of to give it, or to unwrap it. But then we have this body, and we're able to also have this um, spirit move through us, right? And to have this opportunity to be, um, grandfather Wallace Blackout called it being a hollow little bone,
Hmm.
So you become a hollow little bone, or some people would call it being like a tube, like the human being is supposed to be like a tube or a straw. And so in all cultures that are within me, I've heard it said in different ways, but it's saying that same thing, like we're here to bring a gift. But then if if there's um, if there's something that's needed that's bigger than us, we have this way that we can hollow ourselves out and become you know, that vessel, or that, in some cultures or traditions, they call it being a vessel. But spirit is not exclusive to any culture.
Hmm.
Every culture globally, no matter who you are, all of us have ancestors, and all of us need fucking help right now. Like,
Yes.
we all need fucking help. We need help. And we all have spirit. And in my courses, that's what I'm doing is I'm saying, oh, well, what is your idea of spirit and how can you access spirit? And oh, this is your background and that's great. And so how do you, and so it's like discovering, actually writing a book about this right now called Spiritual Identity, right? Or The Way of the Soul. And so, helping people to discover their own spiritual identity, like who are you as a spiritual being? Because we don't have, even we don't even have access to our elders anymore because they're in little waiting rooms,
Mm-hmm.
tucked away in nursing homes, waiting to die instead of being accessed and engaged by the youth for their wisdom and their knowledge, and then the elders having access to the youth for their vision and their perspective, and that's what makes up a village, is all of those different ages of people. That's what it means to have a tribe. And how can we um, begin to open to these different wisdom keepers, whether it is nature or whether it's an elder or whether it is a child who's fresh from the mystery. How can we make sure to have access to the spirit, our own, and the spirit, that spirit that is greater than us, and find out, discover who that is, what that means for ourselves as
Mm-hmm.
individuals and in groups.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Discovering our spirit. And I love how you're, mm, even though we're part of the Great Spirit, but we're, again, this is how I'm interpreting what you're saying. Um,
Mm-hmm.
each one of us are individual expressions of that. And what can we do to learn how and what that is? What is this expression? I am an
Yeah.
expression of spirit or the divine. What does that
Mm-hmm.
mean for me? What who am I? How am I that expression? And if I can tune into that, um, I can enhance my capacity to live well, you know, because I am in line with my quote unquote purpose, a
Right.
greater purpose, a purpose that is hard for me to put into words. It's not, okay, my purpose is to be a doctor or a lawyer or a shaman or whatever. No, no. My purpose is indescribable. It's something that I have to discover, like you're saying. I love that. And so you're mentioning um, that you do this in some your workshops and things of that nature. Can you share a little more about um, the role of leadership? Uh,
Mm.
because I know that you do quite a few workshops, retreats, and training
Mm.
leaders. What
Yeah.
what is the role of leadership in a life well lived, in a good life?
Mm. Well, I had an amazing mentor, Angela Sarian, and I
Mm,
remember Angela said to me once, she said, all good leadership starts in the home. And I took that to heart. And I thought, well, you know, how am I leading myself? First of all, and then and what is the state of my relationships, and how are things going in my home? How are my friendships? And I really appreciated that, and so I think that that's one of the first things. And then I believe that love is is a core value, and I believe that that is the operational mechanism of good leadership. But I think that people don't actually know how it operates, and they don't know how it functions, and kind of don't know what it means. I think, we say self care, we say self love, we say, but people are kind of like, I don't know that, what does that mean?
mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so I believe that the capacity, a leader who has the capacity to love is going to be effective. And we've seen it time and time and time again. And
Mm-hmm.
you see it in the United Nations. I mean, I've seen it in, I have a dear friend who worked with a couple of dear friends who worked with the United Nations for a long time. And just that's one of the things that I see in both of them is there's warmth and there's heart and you know, and yes, she's a human rights lawyer, and to be in that role, and to be doing that work with such warmth and such heart and deep, deep love, right? I believe you know Anyeth, yes? And
Yeah, oh
so,
yeah.
yeah, you know it, yeah. And so I think that that there's just something when you see that kind of quality in a person, you know that they can lead well. So if you can love well, you can lead well. And then you got to just be able to think about other people. You got to be able to create, I say this, win-win, but how do you learn how to create a win-win? So first there's love and how to love, which means I need to know how to acknowledge, I need to know how to be grateful, I need to know how to be generous, and if I don't know how to do those things, I need to learn. I need to be able to have fun and laughter and play. Like those are all aspects of love: honesty, intimacy, vulnerability, courage. All of those things are the makeup of being a good leader, um, because they center in the heart. They begin in the heart and then they move out from the heart. And
Mm-hmm.
in addition, they're not centered on the self. They're very much about the encouragement you and I were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so there's that. And then win-win means I need to have a conversation. So how do we have conversations? No matter how difficult the conversation is, how can we, like really just kind of lean into that, to the challenge, kind of move with the challenge, move with things, recognizing that everyone has an equal contribution and that everyone must contribute equally to the conversation. Everyone must be willing to face the discomfort and in order to move through, to get, to have a new experience, to have a different experience than the one they've had before. If we don't talk about it, if we're not able to have the conversations like what you're doing, then we're not going to be able to create new narratives and live in an even
Mm-hmm.
better world than any world we've known before, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think, did that answer your question, Broderick?
More than answered the question. you, for me, when I ask these questions, I'm like, okay, again, for me, language is just points a finger and let's see what happens. And so the question
Oh,
was to see what that sparked inside of you. And
so
I
much
think,
words.
right, I loved it. I'm like, oh, there's so much you just said in that. And I'm like, when, you know how I feel about love. Love is my guiding principle.
Mhm.
And to hear you say that leadership is about supporting love. Love is a part of what it means to be a leader, and a leader, it helps facilitate more love in the world. You know, a good leader helps facilitate all those positive qualities that you mentioned, but a leader helps us engage in dialogue and conversation in a compassionate way, and I would say a civil way, not necessarily saying it's nice. Civil can be nice,
Right,
but civil
right,
in the terms of like, hold on, we might disagree, but I want to respect you as a human being, and I want to have
right.
this hard, challenging conversation with you. And I think that that's so important, but it has to be.
Mhm.
I feel, and I resonate with you with this. It has to be rooted in love, and love suggests that there's some type of resonance. It goes back to nature again, that we
Yeah.
are in connection with one another. Let's recognize that deep love that's at the foundation of who we are in
Mhm.
relationship. At least that's a term that can be used to describe that foundational relationship that uh, binds us. And to have that in mind, to remind ourselves of that, is so important because we're not going to agree. We have different experiences.
Right,
But how do we
right,
learn how to be like, okay, we're going to disagree and we're not going to get what we want out of this conversation
right.
necessarily. But can we at least remind each other that we are bound together? We are
Yeah.
bound together by something that's so
Mm.
profound that it's really hard to put into words.
Yeah.
We can call it nature, we can call it the divine, the ground of all being, all these various terms. Instead of getting caught up into overly defining a term, no, no, no. What is the term pointing to? Because
Right.
it's really ineffable, it's indescribable. It's something that we can feel, we can sense, but language, it's hard
Mm.
to put it into language. And let's look at language as a means of trying to make sense of our experience. And the importance of these types of conversations, or any conversation, especially when it's rooted in love or grounded in love, is there's a process of discovery for the individual, it's themselves having the conversation or speaking their perspective, their viewpoint, and also the other person. And then there's something that happens in between us. There's something happening in between that can enhance the human experience through dialogue and conversation and interaction. When it's done in a way of valuing the the life of the other person. You
Yeah.
value them, you see them as, well, you're human like me, you're fallible like me.
Yeah.
We're trying to
We're in
figure
this.
it out. I
Yeah.
don't know it all. I think I know it all, of course, but at the end of the day, I don't know it all. And to be
Right?
able to walk into that space and like, okay, let me hear you. I think I know more than you, but I want to hear what you have to say. And maybe I'll walk away from there like, oh, I actually didn't know everything. Um, Hopefully that's that one can walk out of a conversation like that, like, oh, I thought I knew it all, but actually I do not. Um,
Yeah, that's like being too
so
wise. You know, that's
yeah.
right. Which is one of the things that like kills the dream, you know,
Hmm.
is being too wise. So yeah, it's just like, oh, how can I, yeah, because we get so entrenched in our ideas, and it's that ability to go, oh, I'm going to address this, or I'm going to, what was I thinking about? I was thinking about the three things that kill the dream, but also just love will always face the conflict. Real love
Hmm.
will always face the conflict and work to address and process it and resolve it,
Hmm.
right? And but real love is fucking work. I mean, that's
Yes.
work, you know, to
Hmm.
create that win-win.
Yeah,
It's not easy.
I'm with you. This win-win, this positive sum game, we can have it. We feel like we have to have this excessively competitive way of interacting with one another. I'm like, no, we do not. It's not necessary. And I think it's rooted in our philosophical framework, the way we frame things.
Mm,
And we're not even aware of it, how we're framing things. We got to dominate nature. We got to extract what we can out of nature, and we're going to break nature to our will. Now, a lot of us have adopted that viewpoint. So imagine that. I'm looking at you. You are an expression of nature. You
mm,
are
mm,
an expression of nature, and um, if I have a framework for seeing nature as something for me to dominate, to control, then even if I'm not conscious of that viewpoint, that is influencing me in ways that I don't know. And so when I
yeah,
interact with another human being, they are an expression of nature. And well, I can dominate them too. It's
yeah,
okay for me to dominate them because I need to break nature to my will,
yeah.
versus understanding that, well, actually,
Mhm.
I am an expression of it. What does that look like? Now, I didn't say it makes, just simply having that worldview makes everything okay. I don't think that. No, people have had this
Mhm.
worldview and engage in all kinds of wicked violence. But like you said, having that worldview and then trying the difficult work of making that worldview realizable
Mm.
in your interactions, that's hard. That's really hard. It's hard to feel connected with something that you disagree with. And you may feel like, no, I have to, what's the word I'm looking for? I have to, I have to dominate this situation. I have to
Mhm.
own it as my own.
Yeah.
That's the way, that's the means by which I can survive in this world. I'm like, no, actually, you can't. I think we can,
Mhm.
but no, we are codependent, we're interdependent. We've
Yeah,
always been.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's how we got here. We gotten here because we had to work together as a species. We
Well,
had to
sure, yeah,
work
in every
together
way.
in every way.
In every way. Yeah, definitely had to work together.
even with the, if you think about it, it reminds me of when, I'm not going to say the different tribe names because I don't recall that, but you think about the buffalo and how
Mhm.
certain tribes, they hunted the buffalo. The buffalo, they had a sacred relationship with the community and the tribe, and the buffalo was so significant for everything. Practically used every part of the buffalo. Even
Still,
though you still
yeah, yeah.
do, even though they killed the buffalo, they still saw the buffalo as something sacred. And then you have these other Western settlers come here with a mentality of the world is for me to dominate, to control, to manipulate. Just go and just
Mhm.
start wiping out buffalo for no reason, or just hunt for the sake of hunting so you can put something on your wall. And I'm just
Mhm.
like, something is missing in that mentality. It's a very different. You can one
Oh,
argue both people killed an animal, but they
right.
killed that animal in a very different framework, a very different relationship. And I think there's something to looking at that and looking at what worldview would go and kill an animal just for the sake of taking a picture with it and putting a head on his wall. Man, that's very strange.
Well,
Indeed,
that's
way of
yeah,
looking
and
at the
that's
world.
yeah. It's a kind of a more modern way of looking at it too. But what's
Yeah.
true is that it was known that that was the food source
Mm-hmm.
for the people, and that if that food source could be eliminated, then the people would die.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, there's the Oglala Lakota Sioux College on Pine Ridge. There's a really powerful exhibit of some photographs, and you can see photographs of just these horrifying photographs of like two hunters standing on a pile of, I mean, it must be hundreds and hundreds
Oh
and
yeah.
hundreds. And but the intention there was to wipe out the people, and
Yeah.
uh, among other things. So it's that mindset, which is again what you were saying, like total domination and colonization. It's we're going to colonize this place. We're going to take ownership of this place. We're going to disseminate the people. We'll eliminate the people that live here, and it's this mind view um, of really placing oneself at the center, and but that others are disposable.
Yeah.
That these things are disposable, and no life is disposable. I think I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I the buffalo is very central in many of the ceremonies that we do as a
Mm-hmm.
family, and it's central. We work with every part, and it's very central, and those kill it when we kill one, it's done in a sacred way, it's
Mm-hmm.
done in a good way. And you know I think that's another conversation about our sustainability and our food, and but that can we have I ever looked an animal in the eye and asked permission
Mm-hmm.
before, because that purpose of that animal, maybe that animal doesn't want to feed me and keep me alive. If it does, it will offer itself. If it doesn't, it won't. But yeah, it's a very, very painful, difficult conversation that's important, to think about. I do want to say something about how uh, there's a man named Ed Tick, and I believe his organization is called Warrior's Heart, but he works with veterans, and he's a psychotherapist who works with veterans. And I remember hearing him tell a story about, or share a story. He shares a story in his organization about the buffalo, and how the buffalo, when the buffalo are being hunted, the elder, stronger buffalo surround the younger buffalo and the other buffalo, and then um, when after the hunt, then the younger buffalo and the female buffalo will surround the other buffalo, the male buffalo or the stronger buffalo. So
Mm-hmm.
that are now weak because they were running and protecting, and so, but there's just something interesting about that thought of like, oh, how do we surround and protect each other? And I'm thinking about you know and every culture, I remember Angela's talking about this, how every culture is really judged on how it takes care of they're poor, they're children, and they're sick. uh,
Mm-hmm.
we're not doing so hot right now. A
No.
lot of places and people aren't doing so hot right now, and so
Yeah.
so the real question is, you know, how do we create a new, because there's something we need to experience that we have never experienced before, and
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly what you're speaking to, and some of that quality of that is love. Some of that is about, another aspect of, there's so many different aspects of love, but there's validation, but there's also, accountability and apology, and those things need to be authentic. And
Yeah.
it's interesting, I think that people just have a hard time just apologizing, not just saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, but this is what I did. I made a mistake. I apologize. I'm discovering more about myself. This is what I'm doing to work on it. What can I do to make it up to you? That is trying to figure something out and do something different. And one of the things I like to say is, like, in leadership, peace talks, war doesn't, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think where you're coming from, which is around more conversations, uh, to, I think encouraging life, how can we encourage life? And with words, oh, I wanted to say, Broderick, with words, like, I'm a poet and a writer, and I also sing. And, these are the things that heal us. After
Mm-hmm.
when I've been singing, there's so many beautiful healing songs, and all the way from the Basque to the French to the English to the, Mayan, to all of the cultures in my being, to the Lakota song. All of those songs they're healing songs, and they're expressions of the
Mm-hmm.
divine through us. And so in the Mayan calendar, it was a belief until 2012 that time was money. It was 24/7. And so on the Mayan calendar, there was, it was in a cycle, and that cycle ended, was it 2013? We'll have to ask Araceli and make sure of that. But around that time, the cycle changed, and it changed to 2013, which is a feminine number. The other number was a masculine number, and so now it changed to the 2013, um, which is a feminine number and a receptive number. But that means time is art. So we've left the cycle of time is money, and we're in a new cycle called time is art. And
Mm-hmm.
so now the work is, when we're talking about being a tube or being a hollow bone, or it's really what comes through us. It's the songs, it's the dances, it's the words, it's the art forms, it's the poetry, it's the writing, it's the caregiving, not caretaking, but caregiving that we can do,
Mm-hmm.
of each other, of the earth, and the collaboration that we can do. But really, what is my art? What was the art that I landed here with? And if I
Yeah.
don't know what it is, I can explore it and discover it and figure it out. But
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. We're all artists, and like, how do we?
Mhm.
That's a great way of looking at it. How do we glorify art in the way we live? I love
Yeah,
that. I love it. And in the process of doing that, we're glorifying the divine. You can take all of these various traditional metaphors and
yeah.
like and see how they can be intertwined in some capacity. I think about that. Being a vehicle for the divine, being a vehicle for God, and being an
Mm,
expression of beauty and goodness in the world. As an artist, we are an artist. I mean, we truly are. Every day we practice our art and how we express ourselves. And even if you layer on top of that these various artistic expressions that we can do in this world through singing, through, through playing with words, and through drawing, sketching, all types of forms of
you take capoeira.
artwork.
I mean,
Yeah, dancing
yeah,
for
you're
sure.
capoeira.
Movement.
Yeah, you're a practitioner. I'm like, oh yeah, so
Yeah, and
powerful.
so it is. And it's like, we're always this is all divine play, or we call it divine dance, and how do we express that in a
Mm,
way? For me, I'm constantly coming back to how do we express that in a way that's loving, and I
mm,
tailor these conversations towards the good, because I think the good encourages or reminds us that we are all rooted in love,
Mm.
and getting to know that love, and to getting to know how to articulate and express that love in our interactions. I think that that's I shouldn't say that's what we're all trying to do, but I should say that that's a lofty goal that we could be working towards. And that shows up in living well. I think at the bottom
Mm.
of living well is love, is rooted in love. And how do we figure out how to do that? Just like you said, love is difficult. It's difficult to live well. I love how you also said, what does that mean? What does that mean that my purpose? I have to discover it. I have to work at it. We have to
Yeah.
work at living well. I don't know what a single definition of living well means, of the good life, or even love. I can't put it into one word. If I could, this podcast is pointless. Because the whole point is like to talk to different people from different expressions, different
Yeah.
backgrounds, and like, what do you think? And I think that this has been just awesome to have this conversation with you.
Mm.
We could go on and on and on and on, I
Oh yeah.
know, um, but I'm gonna be respectful of your time, and also this is
Mhm.
we're near the end here. And I
Mm.
want to ask you two more questions here. Can you any more thoughts about living well that has come up for you from this conversation?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, so potent, so powerful. I'm looking at all my myriad of notes here, but I think that accessing a place in our lives where love lives,
Yeah.
where love is alive, and allowing that to animate our interactions, but also recognizing that the soul is what animates us. And I think discovering our spiritual values, like what are my spiritual values, and then like actually living them, like not just
Mm,
talking about them, but really,
yeah.
like if love, creativity, communication, all of the different arms of love, of generosity and forgiveness and gratitude.
Yeah.
If those are my core values, my core spiritual values, we need to live them. And
Mm,
that's really something that is in high relief for me right now, especially with things as they are
awesome.
in the world.
Yeah, I know. I know. That's just
Mhm.
beautiful. Are there any that's great. Or are there any final words you would like to leave for the audience? And that could be
Mm.
in any form. That can be a suggestion. That could be a question that you leave the audience. Whatever you feel
Oh,
compelled to say
uh,
here.
yeah, I think, you know, um, there was a talk that Toni Morrison gave, uh, of many, many talks, and speaking of someone who expressed the divine through
Mm-hmm.
writing, and but she her response to Juan Williams in the Connecticut Forum, when she was posed a question, is, "How do you survive in a world where we're all victims of something?" And she
Mm.
responded, "Sometimes you don't survive whole; you just survive in part. But the grandeur of life is that attempt. It's not about the solution. It's about being as fearless as one can, as fearless as one can, and behaving as beautifully as one can under completely impossible circumstances. That makes it elegant. Good is more interesting. Good is just more interesting, more complex, and more demanding, and more demanding." And uh, it's Toni Morrison from her conversation with Juan Williams. And I would just say, I just pose the question, like, what is good demanding of you at this time?
Mm.
And how can you meet that demand? Because it really is more interesting. And,
Absolutely.
and thank you so much for being in my world. You are a luminescent being, and I love being in your presence and having our conversations. It really adds so much meaning and wonder to my world. So thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you so much, Shar. And it's just been lovely having this conversation with you in this medium. You're such a beautiful soul. I just love you, and look forward to many more conversations. And this has been a pleasure.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you, Broderick. I love you, and I will talk with you soon. I look forward to it.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.